I was standing in the corner of a penthouse that probably cost more than most people make in a lifetime, watching my daughter pretend to be happy. That's when I knew I had to make the call. My name is Vincent Reeves, and I'm 68 years old. For the last 5 years, I've been what most people would call retired. I worked as a bookkeeper for 40 years, or at least that's what my family thinks. The truth is a bit more complicated, but we'll get to that. My daughter Caroline is 35 now. Beautiful, smart, everything a father could hope for. She married young to a good man named Peter, and they gave me my grandson, Lucas, who just turned 7. But 3 years ago, Peter was killed in a car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. Caroline was devastated. We all were. That's when Damien Ashford entered our lives. Damien is 38, tall, always wearing suits that cost more than my monthly pension. He owns Ashford Development Corporation, a real estate company that's been buying up properties all over the city. He met Caroline at some charity event about 2 years ago. 6 months later, they were engaged. I had my concerns, but Caroline seemed happy again, and after losing Peter, I just wanted to see her smile. The penthouse party was Damien's idea. He was celebrating closing some major deal, and he'd invited what he called the right people: politicians, investors, other developers. Caroline had asked me to come, said it would mean a lot to her. So I put on my one good suit and showed up. "Vincent!" Damien's voice boomed across the marble foyer as I walked in. He was holding a glass of what I'm sure was expensive scotch, his other arm around Caroline's waist. "Everyone, this is my future father-in-law." Vincent spent his whole life crunching numbers for small businesses. Very humble work. The way he said humble made it sound like an insult. Several of his guests smiled politely and turned back to their conversations. I just nodded and shook his offered hand. "Thank you for having me, Damien." Of course, Caroline insisted. "I told her you might feel out of place with this crowd, but she wanted you here." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "There's a quiet room in the back if all this gets too overwhelming for you. These business discussions can be pretty complex." "I'll manage," I said. Caroline gave me an apologetic look. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held her champagne glass just a bit too tight. This wasn't the first time I'd noticed these things. "Where's Lucas?" I asked. "Oh, Damien thought it would be better if he stayed with a sitter tonight," Caroline said quickly. "This isn't really a kid-friendly event." "I offered to pay for the finest babysitter in the city," Damien added. "Nothing but the best for my future stepson. Though between you and me, Vincent, the boy could use some discipline. Caroline's too soft on him. That's what happens when there's no strong male figure in the house." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. Peter was a good father. I'm sure he was, in his own way. But now Lucas has me. I'm going to teach him what it takes to be successful in this world. Not everyone can be content with small dreams, you know? Before I could respond, someone called Damien over to meet a city councilman. He patted Caroline's shoulder and walked away, leaving us standing there. "Dad, I'm sorry," Caroline said quietly. "He doesn't mean—" "It's fine, sweetheart." I looked at her carefully. "How are you really doing?" "I'm good. Great, actually. Damien's been very generous. He paid off my mortgage last month, and he's setting up a trust fund for Lucas. That's kind of him. He's very focused on success, on moving forward. He thinks we should sell Peter's life insurance money and invest it in one of his developments. He says I could triple my money." Something cold settled in my chest. "What do you think?" "I don't know. I don't really understand these things. Damien says I'm too cautious, that I think too small." She looked away. Maybe he's right. I was about to say more when Damien returned, bringing several men with him. They were all dressed like they'd just walked out of a Wall Street boardroom. "Vincent, let me introduce you to some real players," Damien said, that same condescending smile on his face. "This is Marcus Huang. He owns half the commercial real estate in the business district. That's Senator Briggs. I'm sure you've seen him on TV. And this is Jonathan Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Financial." I shook hands with each of them. They all had that same look, sizing me up and finding me insignificant. "So, you're Caroline's father," Senator Briggs said. Damien tells us you're retired. That's right. What did you do, if you don't mind me asking? I was a bookkeeper. Small businesses, mostly. Ah. The senator's interest visibly waned. Well, that's honest work. Indeed it is, I said. Damien laughed. Vincent's being modest. He's probably the best at managing other people's pennies. I keep telling him he should see what real money looks like, maybe learn something about actual wealth building. The men around him chuckled. I noticed Caroline had moved away, talking to some other guests. She wasn't looking at us. Speaking of wealth building, Marcus Huang said, Damien, tell him about the Riverside project. Damien's eyes lit up. Oh, that's going to be huge. We're buying up all the properties in the Riverside district, going to demolish those old buildings and put up luxury condos. The returns are going to be incredible. Aren't most of those buildings occupied? I asked. Sure, by people paying below market rent, but we're offering them buyouts. Very generous, considering what those places are worth. And if they don't want to sell? Damien shrugged. Then we make the offers less generous. Look, Vincent, I know this seems harsh to someone from your background, but this is how business works. You've got to think big picture. Those people are sitting on prime real estate. They're holding up progress. Some of them have lived there for decades, I said. Exactly. Which means they're probably paying 1980s rent prices. It's unsustainable. He turned to his friends. This is what I mean about small thinking. Vincent here probably thinks I should let them stay there forever, losing money every month just because they've been there a long time. Senator Briggs shook his head. Can't run a business on sentiment. Precisely. Damien put his hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, patronizing. Vincent, you've spent your whole life dealing with small numbers. 500 here, 1,000 there. You probably helped some mom-and-pop shops keep their lights on, and that's admirable. But you've never played at this level. We're talking about tens of millions here. It requires a different mindset. I'm sure it does, I said. The beautiful thing is, Damien continued, getting more animated, I've structured it so the profits flow through 3 different LLCs. Minimizes the tax liability beautifully. By the time the IRS figures out what goes where, we've already moved the money. It's all legal, technically, but you've got to know how to play the game. Jonathan Whitmore laughed. That's why we love working with you, Damien. You know every loophole. I prefer to call them opportunities, Damien said. The tax code is written by people who understand that wealth creation needs protection. Only suckers pay full freight to the government. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, my old instincts were waking up. 3 LLCs, money moving between them, profits being hidden from tax liability. I'd heard variations of this speech hundreds of times before, usually right before I put someone in handcuffs. Sounds complex, I said. Oh, it is. Way over your head, I'm sure. No offense, but you probably just filed 1,040 EZs your whole life, right? This is sophisticated stuff. Multiple holding companies, offshore accounts, shell corporations. It's financial engineering at its finest. Offshore accounts? Well, some of the investment comes from overseas partners. We're talking Cayman Islands, Bermuda, places that understand that privacy is valuable. He lowered his voice, even though we were in a private corner. Between us, about 40% of my actual net worth is in places the IRS can't touch. That's just smart planning. Marcus Huang raised his glass. Here's to smart planning. They all drank. I pretended to sip my water. The best part, Damien continued, is that I'm using Caroline's inheritance from Peter to invest in the Riverside project. She doesn't need that money, just sitting in some conservative account, earning nothing. I'm going to triple it for her in 2 years, maybe less. Does Caroline know the details of this investment? I asked. She trusts me. That's what matters. And honestly, Vincent, she doesn't have the financial sophistication to understand it anyway. No offense to your daughter, but she thinks balancing a checkbook is complicated. This is way beyond her. He laughed. It's beyond you too, but that's okay. Not everyone can be a financial mastermind. I watched him. This man who was going to marry my daughter, who had my grandson calling him dad after barely 2 years. He was so confident, so sure that I was just a harmless old man who'd spent his life adding and subtracting in dusty back offices. "You're probably right," I said. "This is all new to me." "See, you're humble. I respect that. You know your limitations." He turned to his friends. "This is what I love about Caroline's family. No pretensions, very down to earth. Not like some of the social climbers you meet." Senator Briggs smirked. "Speaking of which, how's the fundraiser going?" "Oh, that reminds me." Damien pulled out his phone. "Vincent, I'm going to need you to move out of Caroline's house soon. I know you've been staying there since Peter died, helping with Lucas, but we're going to need that space. I'm moving in next month, and I don't want Lucas getting confused about who the man of the house is." "That's my daughter's house," I said quietly. "Well, it's technically in her name, sure, but I'm paying the bills now. I paid off the mortgage, remember? That makes it mine, practically speaking. And I think it's time Lucas learned to respect male authority. Having Grandpa around undermines that." "I see. Don't worry. I'm not heartless. I'll help you find a nice little apartment somewhere, something affordable on your pension, maybe one of those senior living places. They have activities, I hear. Bingo, that sort of thing." The men around him were trying not to laugh. I could feel it, that familiar heat in my chest that I hadn't felt in 5 years. The anger I'd learned to control over 40 years of investigation work. "That's very thoughtful of you," I said. "I try to take care of family. Even if, you're not really going to be much of an asset to us. Caroline understands. She's ready to move on from the past. New life, new chapter. That means leaving behind everything that reminds her of her old, smaller life. And that includes, well," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I excused myself and found the bathroom. It was bigger than my first apartment, all marble and gold fixtures. I locked the door and took a long breath, looking at myself in the mirror. The gray-haired old man looking back at me had patience. He'd learned patience over 4 decades. When I came out, I found Lucas's photo on Caroline's phone, which she'd left on a side table. My grandson, smiling at the camera, one of his front teeth missing. I thought about what Damien had said. Discipline, strong male figure, teaching him to be successful. I thought about the offshore accounts, the shell corporations, the multiple LLCs designed to hide income from the IRS, the Riverside project that was going to displace dozens of families, the way he was going to invest Caroline's money, the life insurance from Peter's death, in a scheme that had more red flags than a Soviet parade. I made my decision. I found Caroline in the kitchen, helping the catering staff. She'd always done that, even at fancy parties. She couldn't just stand around while other people worked. "Sweetheart," I said quietly, "I need to tell you something." She looked worried. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, but I need you to trust me. In the next few days, things are going to get complicated. I need you to know that whatever happens, I'm doing it to protect you and Lucas." "What are you talking about?" "Just trust me. And Caroline, don't sign anything Damien gives you. Not until after we talk." "Dad, you're scaring me." I hugged her. "I know, but I promise, everything's going to be okay. Your old dad knows a few things about finance that Damien doesn't expect." I left the party shortly after. Damien barely noticed. He was too busy explaining to another investor how he'd structured his latest deal to avoid capital gains taxes. The next morning, I sat in my small apartment, the one I'd lived in for 30 years, and opened my old file cabinet. It was buried in the back of my closet, under winter coats I rarely wore. Inside were things I hadn't looked at in 5 years. My credentials, my case files, my contacts. You see, I wasn't just a bookkeeper. That was my cover story, what I told my family to keep them safe. My real career was spent with the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. I was a special agent. For 40 years, I tracked down tax evaders, money launderers, and financial criminals. I'd sent corrupt CEOs to federal prison. I'd dismantled fraud schemes that cost taxpayers millions. I'd worked cases with the FBI, the DOJ, and the Treasury Department. And I knew exactly what Damien Ashford was doing, because I'd seen it 1,000 times before. I picked up my phone and called an old colleague, Sarah Martinez. She was still active in the CI division, now a senior special agent. "Vincent Reeves," she said when she answered. "I thought you'd died or something. 5 years without a word." "Hello, Sarah. I need a favor." "Of course you do. Nobody calls me just to chat. I have a case for you. Personal interest, but it's legitimate." I could hear her sit up straighter. When I said personal interest, she knew it was serious. We'd worked together for 15 years. She knew I didn't waste her time. "Talk to me," she said. I spent the next hour laying it out. The Riverside project, the multiple LLCs, the offshore accounts Damien had bragged about, the shell corporations, the way he was moving money around to hide income and avoid taxes. His comment about 40% of his net worth being places the IRS can't touch. "He said this out loud?" Sarah asked. "At a party?" "He thought he was among friends, and he thought I was too stupid to understand what he was talking about." She laughed. "Oh, that's beautiful. Give me everything you've got. Names, dates, company names, whatever you heard." I did. I also told her about the Riverside project, the tenants being pushed out with increasingly aggressive buyout offers. "That's not my jurisdiction," she said, "but I know someone at the State Attorney General's office who handles housing fraud. Let me make some calls." "Sarah, my daughter is engaged to this man, and he's got her convinced she should invest her late husband's life insurance money in his scheme." There was a pause. "Okay, that changes things. We move fast." Over the next 2 weeks, I did what I'd done for 40 years. I investigated, but this time, it was personal. I started by visiting the Riverside district, talking to the tenants who were being pressured to sell. I found a pattern. Damien's company would make an initial offer, reasonable but low. When tenants refused, the offers dropped. Then the harassment started. Fake code violations, mysterious problems with utilities, rent increases that seemed designed to force people out. One elderly woman, Mrs. Chen, showed me letters from Ashford Development Corporation. Each one was more threatening than the last, though carefully worded to stay just on the legal side. The latest said that if she didn't accept the current buyout offer, which was 30% less than the original, they'd begin eviction proceedings based on structural concerns. "I've lived here 40 years, she told me, tears in her eyes. "My husband and I raised our children here. Now, they tell me the building is unsafe, but it was fine last month. I took photos of everything. I talked to a dozen other tenants, all with similar stories. Then, I made some calls to the city's building inspector's office. It took some digging, but I found what I was looking for. 3 of the inspectors who'd filed violation reports against Riverside Properties had received consulting fees from an LLC that, when I traced it back, was owned by Damien Ashford. That was bribery. That was fraud. But I needed more. Sarah was building the tax case, pulling subpoenas for Damien's financial records, tracing the money through his various shell companies. The problem was that would take time, maybe months, and Caroline was scheduled to sign investment papers in 2 weeks. I needed something faster. I went to see Caroline one afternoon. Damien was at work. Lucas was at school. We sat in her kitchen, the same kitchen where Peter used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. "Dad, you've been acting strange," she said. "What's going on?" "I need to ask you some questions about Damien, and I need you to be honest with me, even if the answers are hard." She looked uncomfortable. "What kind of questions? Has he asked you to sign anything financial? Anything to do with Peter's life insurance? Or your house?" "Yes, investment papers. He says it's for the Riverside project. Says I'll triple my money." "Have you read them?" "I tried, but they're really complicated. Damien says I don't need to understand all the details, that I just need to trust him." "Caroline, I need you to not sign those papers." "Why not?" "Dad, I know you don't like Damien, but it's not about liking him. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something about my career." I told her. Everything. Who I really was, what I'd really done for 40 years, the cases I'd worked, the criminals I'd caught, why I'd kept it secret. how dangerous some of those people were, how I'd wanted to keep my family safe by keeping them separate from my work. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You're telling me you were some kind of secret agent? Not exactly. IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We were law enforcement, yes, but specifically focused on financial crimes. Tax evasion, money laundering, fraud. And you never told us? Mom never knew? Your mother knew. She had to, for security reasons. But we agreed not to tell you kids. We wanted you to have normal lives. This is insane. She stood up, pacing. Why are you telling me this now? Because Damien Ashford is running a fraud scheme, and he's trying to get you to invest your money in it. Everything he's told you about the Riverside project is designed to separate you from your money while he hides his profits from the government. You're wrong. Damien is successful. He's successful at breaking the law. Caroline, I've spent the last 2 weeks investigating him. He's bribing city inspectors. He's using offshore accounts to hide income. He's got multiple shell corporations designed specifically to evade taxes. And he's about to get caught. She sat down hard. You investigated him? I had to. He's not who you think he is. I don't, Dad. I don't know what to believe. I know. And I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to wait. Don't sign anything. Give me a little more time to show you the truth. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, what about Lucas? Damien's been good to him. Has he? I asked gently. Or has he been trying to replace Peter? Trying to make Lucas into something he's not? She started crying then. I just wanted Lucas to have a father figure. After Peter died, I felt so lost. And Damien seemed so sure of everything. So confident. I know, sweetheart. But confidence isn't the same as character. 2 days later, Sarah called me. We've got him, she said. Vincent, this is bigger than we thought. He's got over $6 million in unreported income hidden in offshore accounts. He's been running this scheme for 8 years. And we found something else. What? The Riverside project is funded with money from a fraudulent investment scheme. He's been running what's basically a Ponzi scheme, using new investors' money to pay returns to earlier investors. Your daughter's insurance money was going to be used to pay off previous investors, while he siphoned the actual profits offshore. I felt sick. So if she'd invested, she would have lost everything, and she'd be tied to the fraud as an investor. Her name would be on the paperwork. When are you moving? Tomorrow morning. Federal marshals, FBI, the whole show. We've got warrants for his arrest, seizure of all his accounts, and search warrants for both his office and his penthouse. I want to be there. Vincent, you're retired. Sarah, I want to be there. She sighed. I'll clear it. But you're observing only. No badge. No authority. Understood. I called Caroline that night. Tomorrow morning, I need you to take Lucas to your friend Jennifer's house. Stay there until I call you. Dad, what's happening? Justice, I said. The next morning, I stood across the street from Ashford Development Corporation's offices with Sarah and about 20 other federal agents. The sun was just coming up, turning the glass high-rise gold. You're sure about this? Sarah asked me. I'm sure. At exactly 7 a.m., we moved. FBI agents went through the front door. IRS agents came in through the parking garage. Federal marshals secured the exits. I followed Sarah up to the 15th floor, where Damien's office was. He was already there, which surprised me. Early riser, apparently. He was on the phone when we walked in, and his face went white when he saw the badges. What the hell is this? He said, hanging up. Sarah held up her credentials. IRS Criminal Investigation Division, Special Agent Martinez. We have a warrant for your arrest, and warrants to seize all electronic devices and documents related to Ashford Development Corporation. There must be some mistake. No mistake, Mr. Ashford. You're under arrest for tax evasion, money laundering, fraud, and conspiracy. That's when he saw me standing behind her. I watched his face as he realized who I was, what I was. You, he said. You're just a bookkeeper. You're nobody. I smiled. Actually, I'm a retired special agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. 40 years of service. And I'm Vincent Reeves, the father of the woman you were about to defraud. He lunged at me. 2 FBI agents grabbed him before he got close. "You had no right," he screamed. "That's my fiancé. My family." "She's my daughter," I said quietly, and I had every right to protect her. They put him in handcuffs. As they let him out, he was still yelling about lawyers and mistakes, and how he was innocent. All the things they always yell. Sarah put her hand on my shoulder. "Good work. I'm retired, remember?" "Right. Retired." She grinned. "Come on. The search is going to take hours. Let's get coffee." By noon, the news was everywhere. Damien Ashford, prominent real estate developer, arrested in massive fraud and tax evasion scheme. Over a dozen co-conspirators also arrested, including Senator Briggs, who'd been receiving illegal campaign contributions, and 2 city inspectors who'd taken bribes. I called Caroline. "You can come home now." She arrived an hour later, Lucas in tow. My grandson ran to me immediately. "Grandpa, Mom says we're not moving." "That's right, buddy. You're staying right here in your house." Caroline looked exhausted. "I saw the news. I can't believe. Was any of it real? The way he felt about you? I don't know. Maybe, in his own way. But the man he showed you wasn't the real him. The real him was someone who hurt people for profit." "I feel so stupid." "You're not stupid. He was a skilled manipulator. That's how these people work. They find vulnerable people and exploit them." I took her hands. "Sweetheart, you lost Peter. You were grieving. You wanted someone to make you feel safe again. That's not stupid. That's human. You could have told me sooner. About your job. About who you really were. Would you have believed me? Without proof?" She thought about that. "Probably not. I would have thought you were just being an overprotective dad." "Exactly. I had to build the case. I had to make sure that when I acted, it would stick. Otherwise, he would have just painted me as a jealous father trying to ruin his daughter's happiness." Lucas tugged on my sleeve. "Grandpa, why did the police take Damien away?" I knelt down to his level. "Because he broke some important rules. Rules about being honest and treating people fairly. Is he coming back?" "No, buddy. He's not coming back." Lucas considered this. "Good. He told me I throw a baseball wrong, and he said my drawings were stupid." Caroline closed her eyes. "I didn't know he said those things." "Kids don't always tell," I said, "especially when they think they're supposed to like someone." Over the next few weeks, the case expanded. The FBI found that Damien's Riverside project had been funded with money from elderly investors who thought they were putting their retirement savings into safe real estate. Instead, Damien had been paying them returns with new investors' money while siphoning millions into offshore accounts. 43 people lost their life savings. But because we'd caught him before the scheme collapsed entirely, and because the seized assets were substantial, the victims would eventually recover most of their money. The tenants in Riverside. The new property manager, appointed by the bankruptcy court, froze all eviction proceedings and restored the rents to their original levels. Mrs. Chen got to stay in her home. Caroline filed papers to break the engagement. The lawyers said it was one of the easiest cases they'd ever handled. When your fiancé is arrested for federal crimes that include defrauding you, the court tends to be sympathetic. One evening, about a month after Damien's arrest, I was at Caroline's house helping Lucas with his homework, math problems, which he was better at than he thought. "Grandpa," he said, "were you really a secret agent?" "Not exactly. More like a detective who specialized in finding people who cheated on their taxes." "That sounds boring." I laughed. "It could be. But sometimes it was exciting, and sometimes it meant protecting people who needed help. Like Mom?" "Yeah, like your mom." Caroline came in from the kitchen. "Lucas, time for bed. Say goodnight to Grandpa." After he'd gone upstairs, she sat down next to me on the couch. "The prosecutor's office called today," she said. "They want me to testify at Damien's trial." "Will you?" "Yes. They said he's facing 20 to 30 years in federal prison, between the tax evasion, the fraud, the money laundering, and the bribery charges." "That sounds about right." I keep thinking about how close I came. If you hadn't been here, if you hadn't known what to look for, I would have lost everything. The house, Peter's insurance money, all of it. And Lucas would have had that man as a stepfather. "But you didn't lose it," That's what matters. Because you protected us. Even when I didn't believe you. Even when I thought you were just being a difficult dad. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. You don't need to apologize. I kept secrets from you your whole life. You had every reason not to believe me. Why did you keep it secret? The job, I mean. Why not just tell us? I thought about how to answer that. Because the people I investigated, some of them were dangerous. Not all of them, but enough. And I didn't want anyone coming after my family to get to me. So I created this cover story, this identity as a boring bookkeeper. It kept you safe, but Mom knew. Your mother was remarkable. She understood why it had to be this way. And she never told a soul, not even her sisters. She took that secret to her grave. We sat in silence for a while. Then Caroline said, "Teach me." Teach you what? How to see what you see. How to know when someone's lying. How to protect myself and Lucas. She looked at me with those eyes that were so much like her mother's. I don't ever want to be that vulnerable again. So I did. Over the following months, I taught her what I'd learned in 40 years of investigation. How to read financial statements. How to spot red flags in investment opportunities. How to verify someone's claims instead of just believing them. How to trust her instincts when something felt wrong. I taught her that being cautious wasn't being weak, that asking questions wasn't being rude, that protecting yourself and your family wasn't being paranoid. And I taught her something else, something I'd learned over 4 decades of putting wealthy criminals in prison. The people who seem the most confident, who promise the most, who make you feel small for questioning them, those are often the ones you should trust the least. Because in my experience, real wealth, real success, real character doesn't need to constantly announce itself. It doesn't need to put other people down to lift itself up. It doesn't need to tell you how smart it is or how stupid you are. The truly successful people I'd known in my career, the ones who built legitimate wealth and helped others along the way, they were almost always humble. They asked questions. They listened. They treated the busboy with the same respect as the CEO. Damien Ashford had been loud, flashy, dismissive of anyone he considered beneath him. And that should have been the first red flag, maybe the only one I needed. 3 months after the arrest, I got a call from Sarah. They're offering him a plea deal, she said. 25 years. He serves at least 20. In exchange, he gives up everyone else involved, including 3 state senators and a federal judge who'd been taking payoffs. Is he taking it? His lawyers are advising him to, if he goes to trial, he's looking at 40 years minimum. We've got him dead to rights on everything. Good. Vincent, this was a good case. One of the best I've worked. You should be proud. I didn't do it for the case. I did it for my daughter. I know. But you still helped take down a major fraud operation and save dozens of victims. That counts for something. After we hung up, I sat in my small apartment and thought about what she'd said. Proud. I wasn't sure that was the right word. Relieved, maybe. Grateful that I'd still had the skills, that I'd recognized the signs in time, that I'd been able to protect Caroline and Lucas. But also sad. Sad that it had been necessary. Sad that someone had targeted my daughter when she was vulnerable. Sad that there were so many people like Damien Ashford out there, always looking for the next victim, always ready to exploit trust and grief and hope. I thought about my 40 years with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, the hundreds of cases I'd worked, the pattern that emerged over and over again. Someone with money and power deciding that the rules didn't apply to them, that they were smarter than everyone else, that they deserved to take what they wanted. And I thought about all the victims, the small business owners who'd lost everything, the elderly couples who'd been swindled out of their retirement, the young families who'd invested in frauds and scams. Most of them never got justice. Most of them never even knew who to call or what to do. They just suffered in silence, blamed themselves, tried to rebuild. But Caroline wouldn't be one of them. Lucas wouldn't grow up with a criminal stepfather. Mrs. Chen wouldn't lose her home. This time, I'd been there. This time, I'd known what to do. And maybe that was enough. A year later, I was in the backyard of Caroline's house, teaching Lucas how to throw a curveball. He was getting good at it, his small hands figuring out the grip I'd shown him. Like this, Grandpa? Perfect. Now remember, it's not about throwing hard. It's about the spin. Finesse over force. He wound up and threw. The ball curved beautifully, just missing the strike zone I'd drawn on the garage door. Almost, he shouted. Did you see that? I saw it, buddy. You're a natural. Caroline came out with lemonade. You two have been out here for an hour. Don't you think it's time for a break? Just 5 more minutes, Mom, Lucas pleaded. Okay, 5 more minutes. Then Grandpa needs to rest his old arm. She sat down on the porch steps, watching us play. The evening sun was golden, the air was warm, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. You know what? Lucas said, chasing down a ball. Tommy's dad works for a bank, and he was telling us about investing at Career Day, and I told him my grandpa used to catch people who stole money. He thought that was cool. Did he now? Yeah. He asked if you ever shot anyone. I said I didn't think so. Did you? No, buddy. My weapon was paperwork and patience. That doesn't sound exciting. It was exciting enough. Later, after Lucas went inside, Caroline and I sat on the porch together. He adores you, she said, more than ever. He's a good kid. He is. And he's lucky to have you. She paused. We both are. I don't think I ever really thanked you for what you did. You don't need to thank me. I'm your father. That's what fathers do. Not all fathers. Some fathers would have just let it happen. Let me make my own mistakes. And you would have paid for those mistakes for the rest of your life. No, I couldn't let that happen. She leaned her head on my shoulder. You saved us, Dad. Really saved us. We sat there as the sun set, watching the sky turn orange and pink. In the distance, I could hear Lucas inside, talking to himself as he played with his toys. Normal sounds, safe sounds. And I realized something. For 40 years, I'd been fighting against people like Damien Ashford, trying to protect strangers from fraud and theft. It had been important work. Work I'd been good at. But this, protecting my own family, seeing my daughter safe and my grandson happy, this was what it had all been for. All those years of investigation, all those skills I'd developed, they'd been preparing me for this moment. For the time when someone tried to hurt the people I loved most. When people think you're harmless, they show you who they really are. Damien had thought I was just a harmless old bookkeeper, too small-minded to understand his sophisticated schemes. He'd shown me exactly who he was, never imagining that I could understand every word, that I knew his playbook better than he did. And that had been his downfall. I don't know if there's a moral to this story. Maybe it's that you should never underestimate the quiet people. Maybe it's that arrogance blinds you to danger. Maybe it's that family is worth protecting, no matter what it costs. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just that 40 years of experience doesn't disappear when you retire. The instincts stay sharp, the knowledge remains. And when someone threatens your family, you use every tool you have. I used the tools I had. And my daughter and grandson are safe. That's all that matters.